Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to go back to 2009 and look at Chelsea against Barcelona in the second leg of the Champions League semi-final. That game is often remembered for controversy, but what it should be remembered here for is the Iniesta goal at the end, but also the fact that Chelsea did have a great tactical plan. When we break down the game and we do look at the board, we have Chelsea in a 4-2-3-1, and we have Barcelona in a 4-3-3 without Thierry Henry, so they did have Iniesta come into play. With Iniesta playing up front, what Guardiola often did in these big away games was ensure that he had another ball-playing midfielder in an advanced zone to ensure that they were able to dictate the tempo of the game away from home and have that superiority in those central zones. When we look at it and we assess how Chelsea are lined up, you have Drogba up front, and the manner in which Chelsea did look to get into good areas stemmed through Drogba flick-ons and down the left-hand side where they had a battle in between Malouda and Dani Alves, and that was the key theme of the game. But Chelsea were good here defensively. They blocked off the central lane. They were compact. They were organized. And when we assess their roles, what you should be seeing here is that you should be having Frank Lampard on Busquets, Michael Ballack tracking Xavi, and then you should have Keita versus Essien, which ended up being not much of a factor here. With that being said, Abidal can be looking to push forward to peg back Anelka, but when you look at Barcelona's overall shape, you have Messi starting central, you have Iniesta looking to drift central, and Ashley Cole did a very good job of tracking his movement out in that zone, so he was often occupied when he moved into those central positions, and that left Samuel Eto'o, who was hugging the touchline or looking to run across into the box ahead of Bozingua. So when you look at that battle in itself, you have to try and find an avenue for Barcelona to create chances, and in midfield they struggled to penetrate and bypass Chelsea's overall shape. Xavi often did look to drop off a bit deeper to get on the ball, and that did become an issue for Chelsea because when he dropped off deeper into those zones, Ballack wasn't essentially tracking him across the pitch, and he was able to clip diagonal balls out into that left channel, whether it be to Eto'o or Iniesta. So that's how they were able to successfully get balls into the attacking zones. But what benefited Barcelona here was that Chelsea's overall structure did encounter a few issues, because initially what we ended up seeing was that Lampard was stepping to Yaya Toure, who was pushing forward from center back, and that would see Lampard shift across to try and close him down, and that left Busquets free in midfield. As that game did go on, though, we eventually did see Lampard sit on Busquets, knowing the fact that if they mark Barcelona across the pitch centrally, there aren't really avenues for Barcelona to play into. You had Messi against the two center backs, and if Messi looked to drop off deeper to check in for the ball, John Terry did a good job of tracking him, and then you had Iniesta marked out of the game. If you swapped their positions, and you'd end up seeing Messi shift out to the right, Iniesta to the left, and Eto'o in a central zone, Eto'o again was occupied by the center back, specifically Terry, and if we did see Iniesta look to drift centrally, Bozingua wouldn't step into his path. We'd have Alex drop off to close him down there, and Messi only influenced the game when he dropped off deeper ahead of the midfield bank. He was able to win individual battles with Ashley Cole as he ran beyond him. There was a time where he cut in on Cole and cut in on Lampard, but that didn't lead to an opportunity. And the other time he was able to run across Cole down that right touchline, but he fired a low cross into Petr Cech. So when you assess the significance of Chelsea keeping that midfield battle locked up, that ended up having to see Lampard sit on Busquets, and there were times where we eventually did see PK step forward and Lampard would shift towards him, but Lampard would block off that passing lane in towards Busquets to ensure that he couldn't get on the ball. The other switch of play that we ended up seeing was that if Xavi did look to drop off a bit deeper, you would have Lampard shift into that zone, and Michael Ballack would simply shift across and close down Busquets. So it was pivotal for Chelsea to ensure that they had markers on Xavi and Busquets, given the fact that Iniesta was often closed down when he played higher up the pitch, and the only real threat that they had besides that was through Dani Alves or the brilliance of Messi. But even when Messi dropped off into deep deeper central zones, the Chelsea midfield was very organized and in sync. So you would have, for instance, Ballack shift across and Lampard tuck in into a central zone. And if Messi looked to cut across, he would be against 3 defenders. And the same thing would apply on the opposite side. If you try to get the ball from the left, it'd be Essien, and then you'd have to get through Lampard and Ballack. And that was a successful ploy from Guus Hiddink. So as important as it was for Chelsea to ensure that they locked up those central zones that Barcelona were insistently trying to play through, it was also pivotal that the wider players in Anelka and Malouda did their jobs to a T. When we look to another example, once again, it's Xavi again, this time from his initial right-handed zone, and he looked to drop deeper as I stated before. And here what he ended up doing was shifting the ball out to Samuel Eto'o, who was looking to run 1v1 against Bozingua. But as Eto'o looks to cut in from the left channel, you have Anelka dropping off deeper to track that run, cover up for his fullback, and win the ball away from Eto'o to ensure that he can't get a shot off on check. And when we look to one final example, we see a combination of both advanced wide Chelsea players doing a very good job of protecting their fullbacks. What ends up happening here is that we have the ball switched out to Iniesta in that left channel. So you have Iniesta against Bozingua, and Anelka does a very good job of tracking back. What Iniesta ends up doing here is he drops the ball off to Abidal in a narrow position, and that pulls out Anelka, but Lampard also shifts over. So Lampard shifts over with Anelka, and that allows Abidal to shift the ball out to Xavi. So when he shifts the ball out to Xavi, what we end up seeing down the right-hand side is Alves looking to break into right half space behind the Chelsea backline. And before Essien can step into the path of Xavi, you have him clip the ball to that far post. But once again, Malouda does a very good job, and this time he ends up clearing the cross. So those were great examples as to how Chelsea were able to stifle Barcelona from dominating in the center of the pitch and ensuring that they were disciplined and tracking the runs of the fullbacks out in the wider areas to ensure that Barcelona couldn't dominate in those wider zones. Meanwhile, when you look at Chelsea's attacking approach, it was very direct, but there were 2 key elements that were consistent throughout. One was that they were looking to punt long balls into Drogba, who would look to win aerial duels ahead of Yaya Toure or Piqué. And the other factor here was that as great as Malouda was tracking the runs of Dani Alves, he was even better getting forward beyond the Barcelona fullback. Even when you look to the build-up to Chelsea's opening goal, yes, it was a moment of brilliance from Essien, but the build-up to that goal stems from a check punt into Barcelona's half, and you see Drogba winning the aerial duel over Yaya Toure, flicking the ball into the left channel for Malouda, who ran off Dani Alves to receive the ball. Dani Alves does do a good job of recovering, and you do see Busquets shift across, but Malouda making that run allows him to receive the ball that Drogba won, and it allows him to play the ball backwards and eventually leads to Essien's opener. And when we look to one of Chelsea's better moments in that first half, we actually see both sides of Malouda here. Initially, he starts the attack by pressing Dani Alves, and he forces Dani Alves to give the ball away into the path of Busquets, where we see Ballack making a challenge to guide the ball into the path of Drogba. Drogba runs across Yaya Toure, but Keita does a good job of coming across to make a slide tackle, but that loose ball ends up falling into the path of Lampard, who ends up finding a gap between Busquets and Dani Alves to play in Malouda. Malouda is able to break down that left channel, and with Piqué coming across, he locates Lampard making one of those famous runs into the box. But when he pulls back the ball into the path of Lampard, Lampard skies his effort over the net. But as you can see in that build-up, you have Malouda working on both sides, pressing from the front, forcing Alves into a mistake, and then having the knowledge to break into that space when Chelsea recover possession. And the one final example that we can look at as to see how Chelsea were looking to get into good positions, once again stems through a check punt up the field. But what ends up happening here is that it doesn't go through Drogba. It ends up falling to Malouda near the halfway line in that left channel, and Malouda is able to turn away from Dani Alves and break towards that left channel. And what was really great about Dani Alves during his peak was that even when he was beat in 1v1 situations or caught out of position, he was able to recover his run, and he was able to do that here. And with Malouda taking him on 1v1, he cuts across Alves, and Alves fouls him at the edge of the box, which eventually does see Drogba fire a low free kick on goal that forces Victor Valdez into a wonderful save. But as you could see in that first half, defensively, Chelsea stifled Barcelona out in the wider areas as they had the attacking wingers looking to drop off deeper to protect the fullbacks. And although initially initially Lampard's positioning was questionable, they were able to make up for their minor issues in midfield and ensure that Barcelona couldn't play through the midfield while having a legitimate route to goal through Drogba flick-ons and Malouda running off Dani Alves. So going into the second half, we were expecting some sort of tactical change from Guardiola, but the pattern of the match remained. Although Chelsea didn't predominantly attack through Malouda down that left-hand side, and we saw him often dropping off deeper to ensure that Dani Alves couldn't break forward, Chelsea were able to get into good areas based off the fact that Barcelona's center backs and fullbacks were making simple mistakes. When we look to one of their better chances, it stems from an Ashley Cole throw-in that is intended for Anelka, but Yaya Touré clears it into the path of Dani Alves. Alves receives the ball, and here we have Malouda stepping into him. He clears the ball off Malouda, and Malouda is able to win it and push forward. What Malouda does here is that now he's able to drive forward, and he's able to split Busquets and Yaya Touré to find Anelka. What Anelka also does well here is that he lets the ball roll across his body, and it ends up bypassing Piqué, which forces Abidal into a central zone and leaves Drogba free in right half space. Anelka now has the ability to play the ball across Abidal into Drogba, and Drogba should be finishing here. He cuts across the sliding Abidal, but he fires a low effort on goal that Valdez does push away. Whereas when we look to Barcelona getting into a good position, it stems through Messi coming off the right channel, and he ends up dragging out Ashley Cole narrow. And what we end up seeing here is Yaya Touré being able to split Malouda and split Ashley Cole to find Dani Alves breaking forward down that right channel. But here what we end up seeing is that Dani Alves plays his cross over the two Chelsea center backs and Eto'o breaking into the box, and it falls to Bozingua, who's able to clear his lines. But as that game continued, Barcelona continued to make more mistakes in their zone. On two occasions, Yaya Touré was bypassed by Drogba, who outmuscled him, and it forced Yaya Touré to make a vital challenge. And then we simply saw the ball bypass Yaya Touré to break in Anelka, but Yaya Touré did well to recover his run and ensure that Anelka couldn't get a shot off. But in that second half, we did see Barcelona go down to 10 men, and it stemmed from a simple check punt that saw Drogba win the aerial duel, and it allowed Anelka to run goal side of Abidal, who pushed him over, and the referee sent him off. That did force Guardiola to rejig his side. We ended up seeing Keita move into left back, and we saw Busquets and Xavi remain in a central zone as Barcelona looked like more of a 4-2-3. What that did lead to was Chelsea being more equipped in that midfield zone, because you can have Lampard and Ballack maintain their positioning on Busquets and Xavi, and if you have Iniesta moving central, you can have Essien shift over towards him, but the more logical positioning for Essien would be to step towards Piqué if he looked to push forward, and then have the Chelsea strikers step towards Yaya Touré, and that would effectively neutralize Barcelona from playing through the midfield. But in those final 25 to 20 minutes of that game, we didn't see much from Barcelona. We had Iniesta cutting off the left channel and getting across markers, but lacking that final ball. Messi was able to get across Ashley Cole, but couldn't test Petr Cech. We ended up seeing Dani Alves constantly push forward, and he was the key outlet for Barcelona, but his front post crosses were cleared by the center backs, and we also saw Michael Ballack clear them on a few occasions. We did see Guardiola turn to his bench once again in the final moments of that game, bringing on Boyan for Busquets, and it shifted Iniesta central, and it gave Barcelona another attacker in the box. And shortly after that, Barcelona were able to equalize, and to no surprise, it stemmed down that right channel. The difference here was that when Xavi shifted out the ball to Dani Alves, he played the cross early before Malouda could come across to close him down. John Terry did a good job of clearing the front post cross ahead of Boyan, and it fell to Eto'o, who couldn't get control of it, and this is where you need Michael Essien to clear his lines. He did it. It ends up falling to Messi, who squares it to Iniesta, and that was the game in itself. But when you break down that game as a whole, yes, it was dominated by the several penalty incidents, but realistically, Chelsea only had one legitimate shout. Nevertheless, it should be remembered for that Iniesta goal and the fact that Chelsea nearly robbed Barcelona of that Guardiola dynasty. They were superb here. They stifled them in those central zones, and Anelka and Malouda did a very good job of ensuring that the fullbacks couldn't get forward, and they neutralized Dani Alves for majority of that game. And Chelsea got into good positions through Malouda winning that battle against Dani Alves, Anelka breaking him behind, and Drogba using his power to get the better of Piqué and getting the better of Yaya Toure. But when you assess it as a whole, Drogba got into so many good positions, didn't take his chances, allowed Barcelona to stay in the game, and frankly, Guardiola didn't shift his tactics here. He consistently relied on Dani Alves breaking forward. He hoped that his side would be able to play through that Chelsea midfield. And with a bit of luck and Dani Alves finally getting the better of Malouda, Barcelona were able to equalize, eventually win the Champions League, and continue to build a dynasty under Guardiola. Hi everybody, thanks for watching and subscribe here for your latest tactical analysis and daily commentary on the Interview show. And if that wasn't enough, don't forget you could find more organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis on the Interviews podcast, the best soccer/football podcast in the world, available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and any Android apps on your Android devices.